My name is Lyra, and everything I ever worked for started in a small corner of a shared bedroom, beside a window that looked out onto the damp, gray streets of Port Blossom. Our house, a salt-bleached two-story that had settled into a permanent sigh, was always filled with the scent of brine and simmering resentment. I was the first in my family to seek a life beyond the shipyard cranes and fishing trawlers that defined our town. I was a student of computational ecology, a field of study that sounded like a foreign language to my family, a secret I whispered to myself in the quiet of the night. I was 23, living at home not by choice, but by the necessity of a scholarship that covered tuition and nothing more. The money I earned from shelving books at the university library and cleaning labs after hours went towards textbooks and the bus fare that carried me out of Port Blossom's fog and into the clear, sharp air of the campus 40 minutes away. My parents made sure I was aware of the space I took up, the food I ate, the electricity I used. I was a guest in the home I grew up in, and my stay had long overstayed its welcome. "Still got your nose in those books," my father would say, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. He'd be in his armchair, the television casting a flickering blue light on his face, a bottle of beer sweating onto the coaster beside him. "Don't know what you think you'll find in there. The world's run by calluses and common sense, not fancy words." My sister, Cora, would echo his sentiment, though her barbs were sharper, aimed with a practiced precision. "Leave her be, Dad. She's practicing for her big new life. The one where she forgets all about us." Cora had chosen the life our parents understood. She'd married her high school sweetheart at 19, had a son by 20, and lived in a neat little house 3 streets over. Her life was a reflection of our parents' values, a validation of their world. She was the good daughter. I was the strange one, the one who dreamt of things they couldn't see. When Cora got engaged, they threw a party that took up the whole backyard. When I won the chancellor's grant, I was told not to get a big head about it. When her son, Milo, was born, my mother cried with joy. When I told them my final thesis was accepted for review, my father grunted and changed the channel. The thesis was my everything. It was the culmination of 4 years of relentless work, a sophisticated software model designed to predict and accelerate the restoration of dying coastal mangrove forests. It was an ode to the very coastline that trapped me, a way to heal the world I saw from my window. My advisor, Dr. Lena Petrova, believed it was groundbreaking. She said it had the potential to change how we approach ecological repair, to bring back ecosystems on the brink of collapse. It was my heart and mind, coded into existence. My laptop was its sanctuary. I carried it with me everywhere, a thin silver rectangle that held my entire future. The tension in the house grew as my submission deadline approached. It was no longer a low hum of disapproval. It was a palpable thing, a weight in the air that made it hard to breathe. They didn't want me to succeed. Success meant I was leaving, and my leaving was a judgment on their staying. One evening, 2 days before the deadline, the atmosphere was particularly thick. I was at the kitchen table, running a final simulation, the low whir of the laptop's fan the only sound in the room. My father came in from the garage, smelling of oil and frustration. He stood behind me, watching the lines of code scroll across the screen. "All that typing," he said, his voice laced with a familiar scorn. "Looks like a whole lot of nothing to me. Your grandfather built ships with his own 2 hands. Real things." "What are you building, Lyra?" "A bunch of pretend trees on a screen." "It's a model, Dad." "It helps people rebuild real forests," I said softly, not looking up. "It's a fantasy," he snapped. He reached out, his hand hovering over the laptop. "This is the problem. You live in here." He tapped the screen with a grease-stained finger. "Not out here, in the real world, with your family." I instinctively covered the laptop with my hands. "Please, I'm almost finished." His face hardened. Cora appeared in the doorway, a silent, watchful presence. She held her phone loosely in her hand, her expression a mixture of curiosity and malice. "Maybe you should take a break, Lyra," she said, her voice deceptively sweet. "You look tired." "I'm fine," I said, my voice tight. "No, you're not," my father said. He shoved the table. It wasn't a violent act, but it was sudden and deliberate. The table jolted, and my laptop slid, teetering on the edge. I lunged for it, but I was too slow. It hit the linoleum floor with a sickening crack of plastic and a faint, final chime. Time seemed to slow down. I stared at the closed laptop, lying at an unnatural angle on the floor. My father just stood there, his chest heaving slightly. Cora's lips curled into a faint, triumphant smile. "Oops," she said, the single word dripping with insincerity. I knelt, my knees pressing into the cold floor. With trembling fingers, I reached out and opened the lid. The screen was a spiderweb of fractured glass, a dark, inky blotch spreading from the point of impact. I pressed the power button. Nothing. The light that had been my constant companion for 4 years was gone. My father grunted. "It's just a machine. You spend too much time with it anyway." He turned and walked into the living room, the sound of the television clicking on a moment later. I looked at Cora. She was still standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable now. "You should have backed it up to the cloud," she said, her voice flat. "Isn't that what smart people do?" I didn't answer. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A strange calm washed over me, cold and clear as the deepest ocean. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The part of me that had always sought their approval, that had withered under their criticism, simply died. It was a quiet, painless death. And in its place, something new and hard and resilient began to form. I slowly gathered the broken pieces of my laptop. The shattered screen, the dented case. I held it like a fallen bird. I stood up, my legs steady. Cora watched me, a flicker of unease in her eyes. She had expected tears, a tantrum, a dramatic scene. My silence was not on her script. "Well," she prodded. "Aren't you going to say anything?" I looked at her, and for the first time, I think she truly saw me. Not the timid younger sister, not the bookish oddball, but someone else. A small smile touched my lips. It wasn't a happy smile, but it was real. "Thank you," I whispered. Her brow furrowed in confusion. For what? But I didn't explain. I didn't need to, because I knew something they couldn't possibly comprehend. They had destroyed the vessel, but not the contents. My thesis wasn't just on that hard drive. It was in my head. It was in the muscle memory of my fingers, in the dozens of notebooks filled with my scrawled equations, in the countless hours I had spent memorizing every variable, every line of code, every ecological principle. They hadn't destroyed my future. They had just given me a reason to rebuild it, stronger and more beautiful than before. And I would build it for myself and myself alone. The next morning, I was gone before the sun rose over the harbor. I left a note on the kitchen counter, a single sentence on a torn piece of notebook paper. "I'm going to the library." It was a truth, but not the whole truth. My silence from the night before had been a promise to myself. This note was a quiet declaration of war. I took the first bus of the day, the broken laptop wrapped in a sweatshirt in my bag, its dead weight a constant reminder. Instead of going to my usual quiet corner in the main library, I went straight to the science building, to the office of Dr. Lena Petrova. Her office was a bright, cluttered space filled with books, geological maps, and thriving plants. She was on the phone, but when she saw me in the doorway, she ended the call immediately. Her warm, intelligent eyes took in my pale face, the dark circles under my eyes, and the way I clutched my bag. "Lyra," she said, her voice gentle. "What's happened?" I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Instead, I unwrapped the laptop and placed it on her desk. She stared at the shattered screen, her expression shifting from concern to a deep, knowing sadness. She didn't ask who did it. She didn't need to. I had told her enough about my family life over the years for her to understand. "The deadline is tomorrow at 5 p.m., I said, my voice hoarse. She looked from the broken machine to my face. "How much is lost?" "The final compiled draft. The presentation visuals. The last 3 weeks of refinements." I took a breath. "But the core architecture, the foundational code, the data sets I have them." "Where?" she asked, leaning forward. Some fragments are on the university's server from a remote sync I did last month. The rest, I tapped my temple. The rest is in here. I can rebuild it. Dr. Petrova studied me for a long moment. I expected pity, perhaps an offer to petition for an extension. Instead, I saw a flicker of something else in her eyes: respect. The computational lab is free for the next 36 hours, she said, her voice firm. I'll authorize priority access. The high-powered simulation rigs are yours. What do you need? Coffee, I said. And for no one to bother me. She smiled, a small, fierce smile. Done. Go, Lyra. Go build. Those next 36 hours were a blur. I didn't just rebuild my thesis, I resurrected it. I moved into the lab, a sterile, climate-controlled room that became my entire world. The hum of the servers was a constant, steady heartbeat. Fueled by black coffee and a cold, burning resolve, I worked with a clarity I had never known. The fragments I recovered from the university server were a skeleton. I spent the first few hours fleshing it out, my fingers flying across the keyboard, pulling the complex code from the depths of my memory. It was all there, every function, every algorithm. The act of recreating it felt less like work and more like an act of translation, of pulling a fully formed idea from my mind and giving it form on the screen. I didn't just replicate my old work. I made it better. The forced reconstruction made me re-examine every line of code, every assumption. I found more elegant solutions, streamlined complex processes, and strengthened the predictive accuracy of the model. The version that emerged from the ashes was leaner, faster, and more powerful. Dr. Petrova checked on me periodically, leaving a fresh pot of coffee, a sandwich, a bottle of water. She never interrupted, just gave me a nod of encouragement before quietly leaving. She was a silent guardian of my sanctuary. With 3 hours to spare, it was done. I created a new set of presentation slides, my mind painting the visuals with a new, raw urgency. At 4:47 p.m., with hands that trembled from exhaustion and caffeine, I clicked submit. Then I slid down the wall, curled up under the desk, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I woke hours later to the gentle pressure of a hand on my shoulder. It was Dr. Petrova. She was holding a cup of tea. You did it, she said softly. I nodded, my body aching, my mind strangely peaceful. My phone, which I had silenced, showed 37 missed calls. Most were from Cora. A few were from my father. I looked at the screen at their names and felt nothing but a distant, quiet finality. I deleted the call log without listening to a single voicemail. The thesis defense was a week later. It was held in a large, sunlit auditorium in front of a panel of professors, visiting scholars, and representatives from ecological foundations and tech firms. Most students were dressed in sharp business attire. I wore a simple black dress I'd owned for years and the same worn-out flats I took the bus in every day. I felt out of place, a ghost from another world. When my name was called, I walked to the podium, my heart pounding. I took a deep breath and began to speak. My voice, at first, was shaky. But as I started to describe the problem, the fragility of our coastlines, the slow death of these vital ecosystems, a change came over me. I wasn't just presenting data, I was telling a story. A story of loss, but also of hope. I clicked through the slides, explaining the complex mathematics and ecological principles with a simple, direct passion. I showed them the simulations, a barren, brown coastline slowly transforming, vibrant green taking root, the digital water clearing. For my final slide, I didn't show a graph or a chart. I showed a picture I had drawn in a notebook years ago, one I had digitized in the final hours in the lab. It was a simple, almost childlike drawing of a mangrove sapling, its roots tangled and deep, pushing through cracked, dry earth towards the water. Resilience, I said, my voice clear and strong, is not the absence of damage. It is the ability to grow back, stronger, in the broken places. The room was silent for a beat. Then, the applause started. It wasn't just polite clapping, it was a wave of sound that washed over me, a validation so profound it felt like sunlight. After the presentations, a man with kind eyes and a warm smile introduced himself. He was Mr. Julian Croft, the head of research and development for Ethelred Innovations, a leading-edge environmental tech firm based on the West Coast. Your model is not just brilliant, Ms. Quinn, he said, shaking my hand. It's necessary. We don't just want to fund your research. We want to hire you. We want you to lead the team that brings this to life. He named a salary that made the air leave my lungs. Full benefits. A relocation package. A laboratory of my own. It was everything I had ever dreamed of, a future I had built for myself in 36 hours of focused, defiant creation. I had not just passed. I had won. I didn't go home for another 3 days. I stayed with a friend from campus, sleeping, eating, and slowly letting the reality of my new life sink in. When I finally walked back through the front door of the house in Port Blossom, it felt like entering a memory. The air was stale with the familiar sense of my childhood, but it was a place I no longer belonged. Cora was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, her arms crossed. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She was holding her phone, the screen lit up with the university's social media page. A picture of me, smiling next to Dr. Petrova, was at the top of the feed, announcing the winner of the Dean's Award for Thesis Excellence. "You've made me a laughingstock," she hissed, her voice trembling with a rage that was really just wounded pride. She shoved the phone towards me. "My friends are sending me this." "Wow, your sister is a genius." "OMG, we're so proud of Lyra. Do you have any idea how that makes me look?" I looked at her, at the raw envy twisting her features. "Like you have a successful sister?" I replied, my voice quiet. "It makes me look like nothing," she cried. "It makes me look like the sister who stayed behind, who settled." "You chose your life, Cora," I said, and there was no judgment in my voice, only a statement of fact. "You have a husband who loves you, a beautiful son, a home. You have everything you ever said you wanted. But you got out," she whispered, and in that whisper, I heard the entire story of her resentment. It wasn't that she was unhappy with her life, it was that I had dared to choose a different one. My father stormed in from the living room, his face flushed. "Where the hell have you been? Your mother's been worried sick." I turned to face him, the man who had tried to break my future on the kitchen floor. I felt no fear, no anger, only a vast, empty distance. "I've been busy," I said. He scoffed. "Busy with your little school project? This is still my house. You still live under my roof." "About that," I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. I handed it to him. He tore it open, his brow furrowed. Inside was a cashier's check. "What's this?" he grumbled, staring at the number. "It's $8,400, I said calmly. "It's for rent. $200 a month for the last 3.5 years. I also factored in a generous estimate for my share of utilities and groceries. We are now even. You will never again have to say that I lived on your dime." He stared at the check, then at me, his mouth slightly agape. He looked utterly bewildered, as if I had just started speaking in a language he couldn't comprehend. The power dynamic, the one he had wielded over me my entire life, had just been nullified by a single piece of paper. I walked to the hall closet and took out my old raincoat. My mother was hovering in the hallway, her face a mask of anxious confusion. She had been a ghost in my struggle, a silent witness to every slight, every cruelty. Her inaction was its own form of violence, and I had no words left for her. "I have a job," I announced to the room. "At Ethelred Innovations. I'm moving to Seattle next month." "Where?" Cora asked, the words sharp with disbelief. I allowed myself a small, genuine smile. "Somewhere with cleaner air." I didn't wait for a response. I walked out the front door and didn't look back. I got into the waiting taxi I had called from my friend's house, and as we pulled away from the curb, I saw my father standing on the porch, holding the check, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. Cora had slammed the door shut, a final, futile act of defiance against a battle she had already lost. The journey wasn't over. 3 weeks later, from my temporary corporate apartment in Seattle, I sent a package back to the house in Port Blossom. It was a small, flat box. Inside was the first academic journal that had published an article about my model, featuring my name on the cover. Taped to it was a post-it note. On it, I had written just 5 words. "You can't break what grows." They never acknowledged the package. I didn't expect them to. People who thrive in the dark are always startled by the light. They didn't know how to respond to my success, only to my struggle. My silence, my absence, was a language they couldn't manipulate. Months melted into a year. My new life took root. My apartment had a wall of windows that overlooked Puget Sound, the water a vast, shimmering expanse of possibility. My work was challenging and fulfilling. I was leading a team of brilliant, passionate people, turning my theoretical model into a practical tool that was already being deployed in pilot programs in Southeast Asia and the Caribbean. I was building things, real things, that healed the world. I had friends. I was learning to play the guitar. I was happy. Then, one rainy Tuesday morning, I got the call. It was an unknown number with a Port Blossom area code. I let it go to voicemail. The message that followed was from Cora. Her voice was thin and strained, stripped of its usual sharp edge. "Lyra, it's me. Dad, he lost his job at the shipyard. Downsizing. And Mom is sick. The doctors are saying it's her heart. It's serious. I know we were awful to you. I know that. But you're the only one who we need your help. Please, just call me." I listened to the message twice. The old Lyra would have been flooded with guilt, with a crushing sense of familial obligation. But the new Lyra simply felt a profound, aching sadness. A sadness for the family that only knew how to ask for help after they had offered nothing but harm. I thought of my mother's silent complicity, my father's casual cruelty, my sister's bitter envy. Their emergency did not constitute a claim on my peace. I deleted the message. A few weeks later, an email arrived that felt like a test from the universe. It was from my old high school in Port Blossom. They were hosting their annual Women in STEM symposium, and they wanted me, Dr. Lyra Quinn, to be the keynote speaker. My first instinct was to decline. The thought of returning to that town, to that building, felt like stepping back into a cage. But then I thought of the girls who were there now, the ones who might be sitting in the back of a classroom, dreaming of things no one around them understood. The girls who were being told their dreams were fantasies. I owed it to them. And maybe I owed it to myself to close this final circle. I wrote back and accepted. I flew in the morning of the event, renting a car at the airport and driving the familiar route into town. Port Blossom looked exactly the same, caught in the amber of its own past. The high school gymnasium was filled with students, teachers, and a few parents. As I was led towards the stage, my eyes scanned the audience. And there they were, sitting in the 3rd row. My father, my mother, and Cora. They must have seen the announcement in the local paper. They sat together, a small, isolated island in the sea of folding chairs. My mother looked frail, her hand resting on my father's arm. He looked tired, his usual bluster gone, replaced by a weary uncertainty. And Cora just looked empty. Her gaze was fixed on me, and for the first time, I saw no malice in it, only a deep, hollow sorrow. My heart gave a single, hard thump against my ribs, but my hands were steady as I arranged my notes on the podium. I hadn't told them I was coming. Their presence was a surprise, but it didn't unnerve me. I was no longer a child in their house, subject to their moods. I was a woman on a stage, in a space that I commanded. "Good morning," I began, my voice clear and amplified by the microphone. "My name is Dr. Lyra Quinn. When I was a student in this very school, I was in love with the intricate patterns of the natural world. I was told my head was in the clouds. I was told that being quiet meant I lacked ambition, that asking too many questions was disruptive. I was told to be more realistic." I paused, my gaze sweeping over the young faces in the crowd, deliberately avoiding the 3rd row. "What I wasn't told," I continued, "is that your unique perspective is your greatest power. I wasn't told that the people who try to shrink your dreams are usually the ones who are afraid of their own. They are terrified of the day you realize that you are not confined to the small box they have built for you. A smattering of applause broke out. I saw Cora shift uncomfortably in her seat. A little over a year ago, just before I was set to submit the most important work of my academic life, the culmination of my entire education, my project was destroyed. Deliberately. By people who wanted to see me fail. They wanted to prove that my dreams were fragile, that my future was something they could take away. They believed if they smashed the container, the contents would be lost forever. I let the words hang in the air. I didn't need to be specific. They knew. I knew. So I rebuilt it. In 36 hours. I rebuilt it from memory and from fragments, but most of all, I rebuilt it from resolve. Because I finally understood that no one can take your future from you. They can create obstacles. They can cause you pain. But you are the architect of your own life. Your worth is not determined by their approval. Your success is not contingent on their permission. I finished my speech, took questions from eager students, and posed for pictures with girls who held up their own science projects with proud smiles. When I finally left the gymnasium, they were waiting for me by the entrance to the parking lot. The three of them, standing together, looking uncertain. My mother spoke first, her voice thin. "Lyra, that was a lovely speech. Can we just talk for a minute?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a woman trapped by a lifetime of choices she was too afraid to question. I saw the mother who had watched her daughter shrink and had done nothing. "No, Mom," I said, the words gentle but firm. "I don't think we have anything left to talk about." My father stepped forward, his hands shoved in his pockets. "We made mistakes, Lyra. We were wrong. But family is family. We should be able to fix this." "Some things aren't meant to be fixed," I said. "They're meant to be left behind so that new things can grow." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a small, sleek flash drive. I held it out to him. "This is the latest version of my project. The one that's helping reforest a coastline in the Philippines. It's being patented next month. I wanted you to have it. I want you to see what it looks like when you build a future instead of trying to tear one down." His hand trembled slightly as he took it. He stared at the small piece of plastic and metal as if it were a burning coal. Cora was the last to speak. Tears were finally streaming down her face, silent and unheeded. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words so quiet I almost didn't hear them. "I was so jealous. I still am. You got to be everything I was too scared to even try to be." I held her gaze for a long moment. I saw the scared girl underneath the spiteful woman. I saw the life she had chosen and the life she now regretted not exploring. I gave her a single, small nod of acknowledgement. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't absolution. It was just seeing her. Without another word, I turned and walked to my rental car. I didn't look back. That night, back in my apartment in Seattle, I didn't light a candle or toast to my victory. I simply stood by my window, watching the ferries glide across the dark water, their lights like slow-moving stars. Revenge was never the goal. The goal was peace. The goal was freedom. And I had found it. Not in their apology or their downfall, but in my own quiet, unyielding ascent. The girl from the salt-sprayed house had finally learned to breathe in a new atmosphere, one she had built for herself, one molecule at a time.